I'm Debbie Hanley. I am the president of High Country Wild, which is a chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation serving the High Country. We've started off this past year and we've been focused mostly on Ash and Watauga, but I have a feeling this year we're going to be pushing out into other counties. But anyway, we're off to a great start. We're happy you're here for this webinar. It's a great thing to do this time of year inside in front of the computer instead of outside. I conveniently missed the work day the other day outside in the cold, but I'm going to try to make it to the one on the 31st. Before I turn it over to Luke, I just want to update you on a couple of things that are coming up for the chapter if you want to be involved. The one I just referenced is on January 31st. This was rescheduled. I think, is this one rescheduled twice?
Just one reschedule, but
Just once.
yes, hopefully just once.
Okay. Well, we had one in December that was rescheduled for January, and I wasn't sure which one was which. But anyway, we have another live stake and tree planting work day on so far January 31st, weather permitting, and that's in partnership with Mountain True, like the one we did a couple weeks ago, last week. Um, The thing that's coming up next is Monday. We're having our next leadership call, and that is going to be our planning session for the rest of the 2026 year, where we're going to pick like all the fun events that we make available to members. And we're opening that up to the public. So if anybody wants to join, I'm going to put in the chat, you can either email me for the Zoom information or just put planning in the chat and we'll make sure to get you the Zoom login. That's a great way to hear what we're going to be doing, hear the conversation, and if you want to be involved in the conversation, you're welcome to join in and tell us like what you'd like to see us do in terms of programming for the next year. And then the other thing that we have on the calendar so far is our chapter chartering ceremony and social, and that's going to be the end of February, the last Monday of February. We're gonna have our leadership meeting starting at 5. Public's invited to join, or if you want to just get there at 6 for the social part, that's open. And if I didn't already say it, we're doing it at the Blue Ridge Conservancy Education Center in Blowing Rock. It's beautiful space, and um, if you're wanting to join us, that would be great. All that stuff is open registration on our website, and highcountrywild.org is our website. We have an events page where we post everything, and we hope you'll join us for some more stuff throughout the year. So I'll turn it over to you, Luke.
Thank you, Debbie. My name is Luke Bennett, and I serve as the conservation coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, based in Asheville and covering Western North Carolina. I definitely encourage folks to check out the High Country Wild chapter. They're a relatively new chapter, and they're already doing a lot of great work for wildlife and habitat in the High Country, thanks to Debbie, the president, and their really great leadership team. Real quick, before we introduce our speaker, a few housekeeping notes. If you'd like to ask a question, please type your question into the chat. You can find the chat button at the bottom of your screen, and you can type in your question at any point during the presentation. We'll save around 10 or 15 minutes at the end to get to as many questions as we can. We'll also be recording this webinar, and that will be available to folks within the next week. We'll send out an email with that YouTube link to all the folks that have registered, so that will be available to you guys. Okay, so on to the fun stuff. We are here to talk about lingering hemlocks, and we are welcoming Olivia Hall, who serves as the Educational Outreach Manager for the Hemlock Restoration Initiative. Olivia, before moving to North Carolina, spent most of her time living in Michigan. She graduated from the University of Michigan in 2020 and graduated with her master's from Northern Michigan in 2023. She loves working with and learning about all things plants and invertebrates. Being from the North Country, she holds a particular affinity for conifers, and she loves the ecological value and beauty that they hold. In her spare time, Olivia loves being outdoors hiking, skiing, or on the water, and she dabbles in other hobbies like cheese making, bagel baking, and rearranging her furniture, which I'm sure we can all relate to. So we are so grateful to have Olivia here tonight. And without further ado, I will pass it to you, Olivia. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I didn't know you were going to go find that bio on our staff page, but it's great. I'm glad that you found it, and everyone
Yeah,
knows
sorry about
my
that.
furniture rearranging hobbies.
Yep.
Um, cool. Thanks everyone for joining us on this Wednesday evening. I'm here to talk to you about this really cool project that we are semi-recently involved in for two reasons. One, just to kind of spread the word about the cool and important work that's being done, and also because we are looking for help. And you guys are the perfect candidates to help us. You're out in the forests, you know maybe what a hemlock looks like, and so we need your eyes in the forest to help us with this project. So that's why we're here today. And let's see. Cool. So the Lingering Hemlock Project is a subset of a larger project called Tree Species in Peril. So I'll go over the large scope for a little bit. Then we'll talk about hemlock trees in general, why they're important, why we're trying to save them. And then I'll talk about the Lingering Hemlock Project in detail, and then go over the two protocols that we are asking for the outside help and support in. So Tree Species in Peril is a collaborative that is led by the Nature Conservancy. It investigates genetic resistance in a couple of different species of North American vulnerable trees. It really is a true collaboration of a ton of different folks from different agencies and universities, different sectors with all different expertises, from education to greenhouse work to lab work. It really is a coming together of everyone throughout the range of these tree species to try and save them, having that, collective goal. So I'm from the Hemlock Restoration Initiative. We are a small nonprofit based in Asheville, North Carolina. Our general mission is to restore Eastern and Carolina hemlocks to their native habitats in North Carolina. And we do so through active management. So we establish what we call hemlock conservation areas. And you can see on this map here, all of those colorful dots are our different hemlock conservation areas in the western part of the state. Apart from our management strategies, we also have a pretty big education program where we will spread the word about hemlock woolly adelgid and the decline of our hemlocks in this area. And we also try to teach landowners and natural resource professionals how to responsibly and economically treat and manage hemlocks on their properties. So that education background kind of set us up really nicely to become involved in this Lingering Hemlock Project by doing their education and outreach. So that's how me and the program that I work for come into the Lingering Hemlock Project as a whole. All right, so within Tree Species in Peril, there are 5 different trees that are being looked at for genetic resistance against these invasive pests. So green ash, white ash, and black ash are all threatened by the emerald ash borer. American beech is threatened by both beech bark disease and beech leaf disease. And then our eastern hemlock is threatened by both hemlock woolly adelgid and elongate hemlock scale. This is kind of the big picture of what Tree Species in Peril wants to accomplish for each of these different tree species. So, it starts by finding the material in our forests and eventually works through the process to restoring these resilient forests of these important species that can withstand these infestations of these invasive insects and pathogens. These are just some examples of some cool research projects that are going on under the Tree Species in Peril program. Over here on our left, there's some beech saplings that are being inoculated with the nematode that causes beech leaf disease to be studied. That picture in the center is an ash tree that is putatively resistant to the emerald ash borer. It's planted in what's called a seed orchard, which is essentially a tree or an orchard that has trees in it that are promising and have some level of resistance. And the stock is continuously bettered and bettered until they have a strain that is strong enough to be planted out into our native forests. So that's where ash is at. Ash is pretty far along in the process, right? We're kind of following in their footsteps for the hemlocks. And as you can see in this photo on the right, we're starting with the basics. So the hemlock sapling in this photo is currently undergoing kind of stress, stress things that stress it out, like drought and temperature and some hormones to try to see if they can get it to produce cones at a quicker rate than is natural for a tree. So that's kind of where we're at. I would love to talk about all of the cool projects that are going on with all of the species that Tree Species in Peril supports. However, we are here to just talk about hemlock, so that's where I'm going to move on. But if anyone else is interested in the ash or the beech work that's going on, please reach out and I can get you in touch with the right people and get you involved in those projects as well. All right, so why hemlocks? Why is hemlock one of the 5 species that this Tree Species in Peril is putting energy and resources into? Well, at the start, it's a foundation species, which means that it really creates the ecosystem that it grows in. So, without the hemlock supporting all of the organisms and species that rely on it, that whole ecosystem will collapse. It prevents erosion and sedimentation on stream banks. Hemlocks, eastern hemlocks specifically, really love those riparian wet corridors. So it really helps with that. It regulates the water quality and temperature. The shade that a hemlock provides really helps cool down the water temperatures to support organisms like trout and macroinvertebrates and our hellbenders. And then, of course, just across the entire forest and stream provides habitat terrestrially and aquatically. So it's really important. And we say a lot that it's not about saving the hemlock itself, it's about saving the ecosystem that comes with it, right? And no other tree can fill the niche that a hemlock does. And that's really important to keep in mind because once we lose the hemlock, we lose those ecosystems that come with it. So what's the issue? So we have these really awesome trees that provide really good ecosystem services. However, there is an invasive insect that was first detected in Richmond, Virginia in 1951 called the Hemlock woolly adelgid. It's basically an aphid-like insect and it attaches to the tree where the twig meets the needle. It feeds on the tree's stored starches and nutrients, and it causes the tree to drop needles one by one. When the tree drops needles, it loses its ability to photosynthesize and uptake water, and it can kill a tree in as little as 4 years in our area of the continent. Up north, it can hang on for closer to 10 years. It has a little bit of cold mortality that can kind of keep its numbers back, but it is really a devastating issue for our trees, and it is the single greatest threat to hemlock health and sustainability. There is another species, invasive insect that is threatening hemlocks as well, called the elongate hemlock scale. It is not as detrimental as hemlock woolly adelgid. We're not seeing it cause the same amount of mass devastation, but it is exacerbating the issue, and it can cause a tree that's infested with adelgid to decline even faster when it has the double stresses of the 2 infestations. So the Lingering Hemlock Project is really looking at protecting against the 2 species of invasive insect. This is just a nice visual. This photo here on the left is kind of a large scale view of what this hemlock decline in the Western North Carolina region has looked like. You can imagine the ecosystem services that stream running through this gorge is no longer receiving as a result of these hemlock deaths. And then the photo on the right is a closer up view of what that might look like. And you can see that Over upslope, closer to the top of that kind of waterfall, there are some nice and healthy hemlocks. That section has been chemically treated. The other side, the left side, on the left side of that dotted line, has not been chemically treated. And so you can see that stark difference of habitat quality that is offered by hemlocks. This is kind of a map of the spread of adelgid. I mentioned that down here in Western North Carolina, we're seeing a little bit more devastation than up in Maine, Michigan, and Canada. And so really we approach this problem with a multifaceted approach. You know, we have multiple tools in our toolbox, and we won't be successful if we just use one over the other. In our day-to-day practices at the Hemlock Restoration Initiative, we're typically using chemical control and also pulling a little bit from biological control to manage our stands of hemlocks in the short term. But I want to talk about the host resistance piece of this management toolbox because it's really the long-term solution. This is kind of what we're hoping can come about, and we can stop maybe using some of our chemical control and other short-term methods once the host resistance piece has been established. All right, so the Lingering Hemlock Project. This is the hemlock subset of tree species in peril. We've thrown around this word a lot, lingering hemlock, but what does it actually mean? Okay, so a lingering hemlock is a hemlock that is dying more slowly than those around it, despite similar HWA infestation levels and despite similar environmental conditions, right? So we want to know why this one hemlock that's healthier than those around it, why is it healthier than those around it? This graphic here on the left is kind of a really perfect example of it. It may look something more like this, where one hemlock is kind of barely hanging on, but it is still alive, while the rest around them have died or are in a more active state of decline. This is kind of a real life example of what that might look like. Again, this one's really kind of obvious. You can see the really stark difference between the healthy hemlock, and then there's one behind it as well, compared to the dead ones around it. Might not always be that obvious, but our hope is that this hemlock that is looking better might contain some level of resistance or tolerance to hemlock woolly adelgid that we can then collect a sample from that tree, learn from it, and put it into a breeding program and bolster that genetic quality. It is really important that I tell you and that we address that we don't know for sure if there is inheritable or inherent resistance out in our native hemlocks. We need to answer that question, right, as the first step of this entire project. The pool in which we are most likely to find these trees that have might have heritable resistance is what we're trying to narrow down. And so that's one of our main goals, is to find trees that are in that pool and continuously better our protocol as we learn more. So this is the general wide scale steps that would be taken in an ideal world. First, we would find these lingering hemlocks that might have some sort of genetic quality. We would then test them both in the lab and in a greenhouse setting. If we find a genetic signature, we would then try to take that and breed resistant hemlocks. We plant those in the resistant orchards that, if you remember, where the ash kind of are at this step in their process. We would then collect seeds from those orchards once the stock is bettered, and then step 6, we would finally restore the forests with this resilient strain of hemlocks. It's also important to note that this is a really long-term process because of the life cycle of trees, and this is a multi-decade process that we're looking at. So we're starting right here at step 1. But we're laying the crucial groundwork that's required to do step 2, 3, 4, all the way to 6. Okay, so I wanted to zoom in really quick to the previous step one to talk about the steps that make up finding these lingering hemlocks. So first we had to determine the qualifications for a lingering hemlock. We wanted to figure out how to define that pool of hemlocks that are most likely to have some sort of genetic signature, right? So this was done by a group of experts from all around the range of hemlocks called the Hemlock Working Group. And they came up with a list of 5 criteria that we use to define a lingering hemlock. I will share that with you all in just a little bit. And then the next step was to develop an app to record all this data that's coming in about all these lingering hemlocks. This was also done by an awesome group through the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. The app is called TreeSnap, and I will also be going pretty in depth into TreeSnap and how to use it. And then finally, we're at number 3, start the search. So once we have folks out in the forest looking for these hemlocks, we can then start sorting through the submissions on our end. We can go collect samples from those that seem the most promising to us. And then we move on to step 6, which is test samples, which is from the previous step 2 in that larger picture. All right, so one of the main criteria that constitutes a lingering hemlock is that we wanted to have at least 80% mortality around a live hemlock. However, not all areas within the hemlock woolly adelgid spread have reached that 80% mortality threshold. So we've adapted our protocol to have 2 different protocols, one for areas that have over 80% hemlock mortality and one for areas that have under 80% hemlock mortality. This can widely differ based on where you are geographically, even within states. So there was a case study done in the Hudson Valley of New York, and even just within that one small area, the mortality ranged from 17% to 82%. So what you can do is, if you're not already familiar with the mortality in the forests that you work in, is you can do what's called a rapid mortality assessment before you decide which protocol's correct for you to do. That's a function of TreeSnap as well, or you can just go out and tally the live hemlocks that you see and tally the dead hemlocks that you see and see kind of what percentage you're at. All right. So I'm going to go through each of these protocols, and this is where we need your help. So if you live or work in an area that has over 80% hemlock mortality, we are asking you to complete the lingering hemlock search. You're going to do this through TreeSnap, which is a free app, and you can download it on most smartphones, probably all smartphones. It works without service. So if you're in the middle of the woods without any connectivity, you can still take your data down and it'll save it, and you can upload it once you get back into range of service. It'll ask you to put down information about the lingering tree in question, and it'll also ask you to do a surrounding mortality assessment about other hemlocks in the area so that we can kind of have a basis to compare the candidate with the surrounding area. The best place to do this search is in places where you think might be 100% mortality. So oftentimes we see these images, whether it be on the computer or with our own eyes walking through the forest or going along the streams or along the roads or trails, and we just see these skeletons of hemlocks poking up, and they stand out, right? Sometimes without taking a second glance or taking another second to look, the hemlock that's barely hanging on but is still alive might blend in. And especially if the deciduous leaves are out on the trees, if it's, spring, summer, they can make those hemlocks really hard to see. So really, the really best time to do this search is now, when the deciduous leaves are off the trees. It makes those hemlocks really stand out, and in areas where there is this huge amount of mortality. Another thing to keep in mind is just that there are a lot of factors that go into the health and vigor of a tree. This can be environmental conditions, this can be competition with species around it, the age of the tree, any human intervention, so treatment or watering or fertilization. Our goal in this search is to try and eliminate all other causes of health and vigor other than genetic background the best we can. So when you're doing these searches and you see a potential lingering hemlock candidate, we ask you to think about everything else that could be making this tree more healthy than the ones around it. And if you can't come up with a good reason other than some potential genetic background, that might be a really, really good one to submit. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the criteria that the Hemlock Working Group came up with that defines a lingering hemlock candidate. As I go through these, just keep in mind that they are not set in stone. There's caveats to all of them, and this again is just making our search pool smaller, and we'll probably continue to get smaller as we go through this process. All right, so first and foremost, we want to have a lingering hemlock candidate that is at least 4 inches in diameter at breast height. So any smaller than 4 inches in diameter, and we're now talking like it's going to be hard to see the dead hemlocks that are that small. The small ones tend to hang on a little bit longer than the large ones anyway, so we might just be seeing the natural progression of mortality. With that said, if you see a hemlock that is 4 inches in diameter and you see 10 hemlocks that are 4 inches in diameter that are dead around it, we still encourage you to make that submission. Just maybe make a note of that in the comment section that it is smaller than 4 inches, but that's just kind of a general guideline. So this little sapling here on the left would not maybe be a very good hemlock candidate or lingering hemlock candidate, but the one on the right, you can see is large enough that it would qualify in this criteria. Okay, so the second thing we're looking for is we want it to be growing in a forested setting. So any landscape hemlocks probably had a little bit of a leg up in its past, whether that be from extra watering, whether that be from extra sunlight or just nurgative care. We don't want any of that to be the reason that the hemlock is alive and thriving. And so for that reason, we are only asking for forested hemlock submissions at this time. So this landscape hemlock would not be a good candidate to submit, but this one that is growing in the forest would be. Cool, so we mentioned this one already, but it's arguably the most important one. We want the hemlock to be surrounded by at least 80% mortality. I want to make the distinction here that this can be dead or dying hemlocks. So as long as there's a stark difference in the lingering hemlock candidate and the less healthy ones around it, those less healthy trees do not have to be dead. They just have to be in a more active state of decline, and the ratio of those two states of decline has to be 80% or more. In general, if you see a tree that stands out among the trees that are around it, that might be a good one to submit. So these hemlocks here on the left are just kind of all in the same state of decline, so that maybe wouldn't be a good candidate. Same with the ones in the middle. And then, of course, the one on the right here, you can see that one is really obvious. This is a good time to bring up that dead hemlocks can be sometimes a little tricky to ID, especially if you don't know what you're looking for. So hemlocks and other conifers will usually retain its branches from crown to root. And that differs from our hardwoods that will have the dead branches that are kind of clustered at the top of the tree. There is a trick that you can use to identify between hemlock and white pine, and that is white pine branches kind of come off of the trunk in this wagon wheel whorl pattern, so whorl, WHORL, versus hemlock branches are going to come off seemingly sporadically. There won't be like a pattern to it. Another key thing to look out for is the reishi mushroom. This is a hemlock obligate mushroom, and so if you see this mushroom growing on some dead wood, especially in western North Carolina, you can almost guarantee that that is a hemlock. I know there are other species of reishi mushrooms up north that will grow on other species of trees, so if that applies to you, look into that and figure out how to ID between the two species of reishi, but it can be a really good tool to identify the dead wood. Okay, so moving on through our criteria, this one might be kind of repetitive, but just compared to surrounding hemlocks, we want the lingering hemlock in question to have deeper, greener needles, thicker, fuller branches, and just in general, less sky visible when looking through the canopy. This is just really still getting at that we want the health of the lingering hemlock candidate to be different than the health of those around it. These hemlocks here, although looking not very good, there's not quite enough of a 80% mortality ratio for it to qualify. This one in the middle might even be a pine tree, I'm not sure, but yeah, that one would not be a good candidate. These ones over here on the right would not be good candidates either because, again, although not thriving, they're all about in a similar state of health and a similar state of decline. So we wouldn't want to submit that. So in this picture here on the left, I think I can get my laser pointer out and maybe, no, I can't. That's okay. There's a hemlock that is poking up behind the canopy, the crowns of all the trees that is alive. And you can see that there are a ton of dead hemlocks that are around it. This would be a really good one to submit. And then these ones over here, again, though in a pretty active state of decline, they're all pretty similar, so not very good candidates.
Olivia, we can see your mouse on the screen, by the way.
Oh, sweet.
Yes.
Well, then there you go. There's that hemlock that I was talking about. Poking up right there. Cool. And then the final criteria that we're looking for is that we do not want it to have been treated with pesticides or horticultural oils in the last 10 to 15 years. We don't want, the reason for this hemlock, we don't want it to be alive because it has chemical protection, even residually. There are some caveats to this rule as well. So for example, if you manage some land and there is a stand of 40 hemlocks and you know that there are 2 hemlocks that are alive on it while the rest are dead and they are being chemically protected. However, at the time of that chemical treatment, they were already the ones that were the only ones alive. Those are fine to submit. We just need that historical knowledge that they were indeed before treatment different from those around it. Depending on your area and the agencies that are doing your hemlock treatments, the markings can look different, but you can expect to see either like some spray paint dots or some metal tree tags. And that's kind of how you can tell whether or not a hemlock's been treated. I would say 99% of the time that a hemlock is treated, it should be treated or it should be marked in some shape or form. Where'd my mouse go? Okay, so that would not be a good one to submit because you can see there's treatment marks on it. And the same with that one because there's a little metal tag on it indicating that has been chemically treated. All right, so those are all the official criteria that we are asking you to look for in a lingering hemlock. However, there is still one more thing that I want to talk about. It's not an official criteria, but it's really important. So hemlocks are shown to respond really well to good sunlight exposure. It doesn't seem to affect the adelgid population at all, but with increased sunlight, a hemlock is able to withstand adelgid infestations much better than its shaded counterpart. We've been seeing this a lot in our searches, that sometimes a hemlock that might seem like it's a good lingering hemlock candidate, once you really look at it closely, it becomes obvious that it is just healthier than the others because it's in direct sunlight. So we're asking you to use your discretion when determining if sunlight or other environmental factors are creating this tolerance rather than the hemlock's genetic makeup. There's not a question on tree snap that will ask you about this specifically, but please just keep that in the back of your head and keep an eye out for that as you're looking. All right, so I just wanted to throw these out here again, just to run through them, just so you remember them. At least 4 inches in diameter at breast height. That's about 12 plus a little bit more inches in circumference. We want it to be growing in a forested setting, so no landscape trees. Over 80% of the surrounding hemlocks are dead or dying. Compared to surrounding hemlocks, we want it to have deeper, greener needles, thicker, fuller branches, and less sky visible when looking through the tree canopy. And then finally, it should not have been treated for adelgid or anything in the last 10 to 15 years. Okay, so now I'm going to throw up some screenshots of tree snap. If you have tree snap on your phone, feel free to follow along. If you don't have tree snap on your phone, feel free to download it. But this is what it'll look like once you open it up. The home screen will pop up. These species are all showing projects that tree snap supports, and all of them, if you click into them, have information about those different projects. And so if you're interested in learning more about those and how you can help, it's a really cool to look through. But anyways, for this project, you'll click Hemlock. It'll then take you to this screen in the middle. And these questions that you see here are the only mandatory questions that you have to answer. So these are the GPS of the tree, which all you have to do is tap, and it just takes your phone's GPS coordinates. You have to have some photos of the tree. You have to put in a collection purpose. So for this instance, you'll want to put in lingering hemlock data reporting. There are a couple different prompts for a couple different projects, but that's the one you'll put in for this project. And then finally, observation subject. So it'll be single lingering hemlock. I think I even have a screenshot of that. Oh, no, so those are the collection purposes. Those are the other options there. But moving forward into observation subject, you can do a single lingering hemlock, a group of lingering hemlocks, or you can tell us that that 80% mortality threshold isn't reached, or that there's not even hemlocks in the area. This is also a good time to talk about scale, right? So you can report either 1 lingering hemlock that's surrounded by at least 4 dead hemlocks, or you can report 2, 3, 4, 5 lingering hemlocks that are surrounded by their respective 80% mortality around it. And a question we get a lot is what scale are we looking at, right? How wide is this search? And the answer is that it kind of depends. So I don't have a great answer for you, but in general, we want you to look as far as the environmental conditions are the same. So if you have hemlocks that are growing along a stream that are alive, and then hemlocks that are upslope of it that are dead, we might not want to compare those two stands to each other because their environmental conditions are so vastly different. You know, water availability might be different, sunlight might be different, the soil type might be different. So really look as far as those conditions are the same. Oh, 1 second. My Adobe Flash Player is trying to update on me. Give me 1 second. You guys don't see my screen anymore, right?
I still see your screen. It looks like a white rectangle came up on the corner, but no, I don't see what you're doing with Adobe at the moment.
Okay, it's telling me my screen sharing is paused.
It looks good now.
Okay, cool. All right, moving on. So anyways, yes, environmental conditions are the same. We want to look through similar, even slopes and aspects, maybe trying to make all of those the same, okay? All right, so, okay, moving on from there, then it will bring up a ton more questions for you to answer. All of these are optional, and all of these you can answer as many as you have time for. However, the more you answer, the easier it is for us on our end to determine whether or not that's a candidate that we're interested in learning more about or going to collect from, right? So we want to make this the least burden possible for you to submit information to us. With that said, answer as many questions as you can. I also want to point out that there's this information tab right here that if you click on it, it gives you everything I kind of already talked about. It'll give you those criteria, those 5 criteria. It'll give you some identification resources, an overview of hemlock and all that. So if you ever find yourself lost, you can just go to that information tab. Cool. I just want to I'm not going to go through each question individually, but I do just want to touch on a couple that have some confusion. So mainly the hemlock woolly adelgid infestation level 1, we call light if it is under 20% of the needles that have adelgid at the base. We call it moderate if there are 20 to 50% of the needles having HWA, and then we'll call it heavy if over 50% of the needles have hemlock woolly adelgid at the base. And I also want to point out, going back, that this show examples, if you click on that right there, it'll show these exact pictures here. So that'll be there for your, if you need a refresher. Same with elongate hemlock scale. Light is going to be under 20% of the needles, moderate is going to be 20 to 50% of the needles, and then heavy is going to be over half of the needles having scale on them. Crown health, again, you can click on show examples to show what I'm about to show you. But we call it healthy if over 80% of the trunk has live green growth coming off of it. We'll call it in decline if only 80 to 20% of the trunk has live green growth coming off of it. And then we'll call it a severe decline if less than 20% of that trunk has live green growth coming off of it. Cool. It'll ask you if you see any other stressors on the tree, and then it'll ask you, if so, which ones. I just want to throw a couple up here, ones you might want to keep an eye out for. Hemlock borer can cause the bark to turn red, and sapsuckers really like getting at them, so there can be some sapsucker holes in the bark. Spider mites can cause the needles to turn kind of like dirty looking. Hemlock tip blight causes the tips to be wilty, and then there's a couple root rots and some other fungal stuff that can affect hemlocks. You don't have to ID these down to species when you're putting in if there's other stressors, but it is just important to know maybe what you're kind of keeping an eye out for, so you can generally say what else the hemlock has going on for it. Okay, it'll ask you if cones are present, what the crown position of the tree is. So dominant will be if it's over the canopy of the forest, codominant will be if it's making up that canopy, and then overtopped will be if it has no sunlight and, you know, all of the other trees are completely blocking that out from the sun. New growth, habitat, all questions that will be asked, all optional questions. Finally, it'll ask you if you've completed a lingering hemlock search training. Since you're in this webinar, you can go ahead and say yes. That just helps us to know also if it helps us to know that your submission might have a little bit more meat to it, since you might know what you're doing more than someone who just downloaded the app without getting any sort of training. It'll then ask you to answer even more questions, which is even more optional, but encouraged again. It'll ask you about the nearby HWA infestation. It'll ask you about the nearby crown health. And again, that just allows us to compare the lingering hemlock candidate to those around it in the best way we can without extending our resources to going out to this tree to collect from it, only to find that it's not a very good candidate. All right, so then you'll just click upload, and this is what it'll look like. Once you've done that, you can go through and access them yourself. Yeah, so this is a really good picture. It's true, 100% accurate of people looking for lingering hemlocks. No, but for real, even though we know it's super fun, we're not asking you to go out and do a specific search just for lingering hemlocks. We more so want it to just be in the back of your head as you're doing your day-to-day work in the forest anyways. And then I also just want to point out that we can glean some information about the area that you're searching in after you submit it. So we can kind of like look at any history of that site. And then, yeah, we move on from there. In general, we expect these lingering hemlocks to be far-flung, every corner of its range, hiding in the depths of the forest. And so we really need folks looking in every corner of its region. There, you saw that picture of tree species in peril. There aren't that many of us. We can't cover the entire ground of the range of eastern hemlock. So we really need you guys to be our eyes on the ground. There's also limited time because these hemlocks, we're expecting them to be only partially resistant. We are expecting that they will die eventually. We want to find them and be able to learn from them before that happens. And again, even if you just make one quality lingering hemlock submission and then you're done, that's great. That's going to get us closer to our goal than if you make none at all. And that's all we can ask of you. Okay, so now what if you live or work in an area that does not have that 80% hemlock mortality, so you don't have any lingering hemlock candidates? Well, you can still get involved and you can still help in a really meaningful way. And so for those folks, we are asking them to install hemlock health monitoring plots. These are going to do a bunch of different things for us. So first, they're going to track hemlock mortality progression in different parts of the continent as adelgid moves further and further north. We don't quite yet have a great way of showing how hemlock mortality progresses at a geographical large scale. So this will help with that. They'll also act as sentinel stands. So once you have your stand of say 20 hemlocks and 18 of them die, those 2 hemlocks that are remaining might be good lingering hemlocks candidates. And you also know that the surrounding area might be ready for a lingering hemlock search as well. So for this, we're asking folks who are a part of an organization with the capacity to conduct annual surveys kind of indefinitely. We want at least 20 to 40 living hemlocks near each other, less than 80% hemlock mortality, and then again, untreated in the last 15 years and unlikely to be treated in the next 15 years. We don't want any of that treatment to be confounding our findings. All right, so basically what you'll do, the biggest effort is in the first year. You'll go in, mark your plot boundaries, mark all the trees that you're going to monitor annually, take GPS coordinates, some initial information about them. And then from there, you'll just go ahead and collect information on trees annually. So I threw up some photographs of what these forms look like, and this QR code here will send you right to the page on our website where you can access these forms. I will say we are currently in the process of moving to another app to support the plot monitoring process called Tree Snap Plots, but it's still in its beta version, and we don't have that ready yet, up and running. So in the meantime, we're asking people to use these forms, but just keep in mind there might be a transition in the future. Cool, so you'll take plot information, GPS coordinates, habitat, slope, a bunch of data there. You'll take information on all of the dead trees that are, or all the dead hemlocks that are in the stand at time of installation. And then you'll take records of the trees that you're tagging as your monitoring trees. The first ones are just really simple. So tree tag numbers, species, latitude, and longitude. And then this is the form that you'll fill out every year. So it'll ask you what the DBH is. So we'll see if it's growing. We'll see if it's still alive or maybe it's died. What the HWA infestation level is, EHS infestation level, crown health, canopy position, treatment status, just so we can kind of track the health of these trees through the years. Um, these are optional questions that you can answer about your annual plot information, any biological control that might have been released, any regeneration that might have come up since the last year you were there, any other stressors that you might be seeing. These are some graphics of what plot examples might look like. You can go along a trail called a transect plot. You can do it in a radius, so you mark a center and then go out an equidistance around that center. That's best for like really dense stands or maybe really flat stands. These are some pictures of what some of these plots might look like. This here, I think, is one of those radius plots that I was talking about. And here are our partners at the New York State Hemlock Initiative who are setting up one of their plots. Cool. So this is definitely the more in depth and the protocol that takes the most investment, right? And so if you're interested in getting involved, this is your contact, Matt Del Buono. He's at the New York State Hemlock Initiative. That's his email there, and I'll throw it in the chat when I'm done with this talk. But he's really awesome. Please reach out to him if you're even interested in learning more, or you think you might have the ability to do this maybe in 3 years even. He would really like to know that. And so please reach out to him. Cool. So we found lingering hemlocks. We have them recorded in TreeSnap. Now what? What's the next step? Now that these two protocols are up and running, where do we go from here? Well, just getting to step 2 of this longer term process will be a win and will be a benefit for hemlock conservation as a whole. This is going to be a large data set that will be able to be used for so many studies on hemlocks, whether even if we don't find that heritable resistance, right? It's always in our benefit to know where there are hemlocks still surviving, right? Your submission might show us that there is some really healthy hemlocks in the middle of Virginia that we didn't know about. And now we can go there and prioritize some other management strategies to keep that stand healthy and alive. Again, we really just can't do this without you. We need you to be our eyes on the ground. We really look forward to you all helping us. Happy searching. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention all of the partners that make the Hemlock or the Lingering Hemlock Project possible, everyone who is so talented in their expertise. And this is my contact information, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you so much, Olivia. I hope people feel inspired to go out and look for some lingering hemlocks. I've been doing it myself, and like you said, it's not something you have to like go out and like that's your focus, but it can just be something in the back of your mind while you're hiking, backpacking, birding, what have you. But yeah, again, really appreciate you laying out that really great information, a really great initiative. Got a few questions. If anybody would like to add some more questions into the chat, feel free to go ahead and do so. We've got time for a few here. First one from John. So I think this was this is a little bit earlier in the conversation. I believe this was referencing scales versus woolly adelgids. John says that both diseases look similar. How do you identify, I guess, between a scale and a woolly adelgid?
Yeah, that's a really good question. With everyone's forgiveness, I'm going to click through all my slides really quick so that I can go to those pictures.
We're getting it all in reverse now.
It's a really good question, and we do get it a lot.
Mhm.
Let's see. Yeah, you guys are getting a recap right now. Read backwards. That's how you really know if you're ready to go look. Okay, cool. So adelgid is going to be these, they both put on a slightly similar woolly coat, if you will, right? But you'll see here that adelgid really nestles itself at the base of the twig where it meets the needle. And you can see that in this picture, it's really zoomed in. But you can also kind of see it in this more zoomed out photo here on the right. Versus scale is going to be on the underside of the needle itself. So this brown stuff and the white stuff, those are both scale individuals, but they're on the needle itself. They're not actually at the base there where it meets the twig. So that's the best way to tell between the two.
You might need to get your magnifying glass out, John. Go looking for scales and woolies. The next question, somebody sent this directly to me. Have you, and I think it's a really good question. Have you seen any like have you seen any trends or patterns? It might be too early to tell, but in terms of where some of these lingering hemlocks are located, maybe like geographically or just in certain habitat types, any trends, any patterns that you guys have recognized so far?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is kind of too early to tell in a lot of cases. I will say that there's a really cool kind of one pager that our partners at the Ecological Restoration Institute put out, and they were finding that the areas with the most stressful conditions for hemlocks are going to result in lingering hemlocks in a quicker and more obvious way. And these places are really steep slopes and this in obviously the southeast and west where the decline where the adelgid has been here for the longest. On a larger scale, yeah, I mean, I can say like Highlands, North Carolina has a lot of them, but that's just like observational. I don't think there's any actual uh, data to back me on that. Um, we've had way more activity and participation in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and New York. And so we'll see a lot in there, but we don't have a lot of participation right now in like Virginia, West Eastern Tennessee, and in those areas right now aren't showing to have a lot of lingering hemlocks, but I think we just don't have enough people looking yet. So that's not really super telling. I know that doesn't really answer the question, but it answers it to the best that I can.
When you guys get like a submission for a lingering hemlock, do you like personally go out if it's like a really promising one, do you go personally go out there and like look at it or observe
Yes.
it? Okay.
Yes, if it is yeah, so that's why we ask that people take as many pictures as possible, answer as many questions as possible, and put as much information in the comments as they can, because that is a better way to tell us if it's a good lingering hemlock. Because yeah, we are going out and looking at all of these submissions if we think it's promising. And if there's not a ton of information to go on, we either might not go visit it because we don't think it's promising, but maybe it is and you just didn't put enough information, or we think that it is promising and we go out there and it's not a good candidate because the extra information wasn't there. Yeah, there was time and resources that we expended to go look. Not to say that we don't want you to submit one if you don't have time to put that stuff, but it does help us because yes, me personally and our very small team are going out and looking at all of these.
Christine asked an interesting question, one that I've wondered myself out in Pisgah National Forest. Christine asks, this is a tough question too, is there hope? It's a big word. Is there hope for the little saplings, the little hemlock saplings I see in Pisgah?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where you're at in Pisgah. I will say, the moving past the Lingering Hemlock Project and speaking more locally for the Hemlock Restoration Initiative, where I work, we have a lot of hemlock conservation areas within the Pisgah National Forest, and within those areas, we do treat those little saplings so that they can grow and continue to provide ecosystem services until we can get something like this off the ground. So yeah, I would say there is hope. I think that there's organizations and people out there who are protecting them in the meantime, and there's a lot of effort going into these long-term projects to make that future brighter.
Has there been like a success story with another species that was, affected by an adelgid or another another disease? Like, has there been a success story or a similar project like the Lingering Hemlock Initiative? Or...
Yeah, there has been. That's a really good question. And I'm not going to be able to tell you what species it off the top of my head because it's not from around here. But one of our main uh, folks who we try to learn from in the Tree Species in Peril collaboration is a gentleman from the Pacific Northwest who has worked with a species there. And I want to say it's a pine in the Pacific Northwest. And yes, they have been able to go through a breeding program and they've created a resistant species that withstands the invasive insect. I could probably find it in like 5 minutes and let anyone know. So if you really want to know, please reach out and I will give you the information and the name of that gentleman. And then also ash trees more locally. Again, we're not at that last step of restoring the forest with the ash, but we are a lot more ahead than we are in the hemlocks. And again, we have those putatively resistant ash trees, which is really promising. And yeah, those are whose footsteps we're working in.
Justin asks, are there any forests that have hemlocks growing within a relatively short driving distance of the Charlotte area?
Hmm. It depends on what you mean by relatively short. Um,
True.
Probably not. Um, I'm gonna say probably not. The line of the native range of hemlocks tends to be like no further west than Morganton. And then it kind of follows the line of the mountains north into like Boone and stuff. So probably not from Charlotte. But if you come into Western North Carolina, yes, there's a ton.
John is wondering, what is a good resource for landowners wanting to save their hemlocks?
Great question. I can put, no, I lost my mouse. Here we go. I'm gonna put the Hemlock Restoration Initiative's website in the chat here. John, I'm not sure where you're coming from, and all of the resources that are on our website are North Carolina specific, but it's a good place to start. And if you are looking for more state specific information that isn't North Carolina, you can contact your state level of forest health folks. So whether that be DNR or state level Forest Service, those are really good places as well.
We've got some inside information on John. He's in Ashe County.
Oh,
He's in North
great. Okay,
Carolina.
cool. Then yeah, John, take a look at our page. We do like treatment demonstrations where we can actually show you how to treat your hemlock, but in general, it's really DIY friendly. It's pretty cheap to buy. Our page has everything from, how to identify a hemlock to choosing which chemical to treat with it, to how to mix it, to how to apply it. And if you have any questions, our contact info is on there, and we take landowner phone calls and landowner emails, and we can talk through your specific situation with you.
Yeah, I've seen some of the work that y'all have done, specifically like out in Montreat. And I mean, it's saved that habitat and
Yeah.
that ecosystem. So I really encourage folks to check out y'all's website, and it just does a really great job just explaining the importance of hemlocks too. It's really, really great
Yeah,
resource.
thanks.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. One that I was kind of just curious about is, and this might be a hard question too, but like, what are like the challenges for introducing, and I know you guys aren't there yet, but like, what are the challenges for introducing a genetically modified species onto the landscape?
Yeah, do you mean like short term? Like what are the hurdles that we have to overcome to successfully do it, or do you mean like long term?
I guess a little bit of both. Short term is what I'm more thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually, so the main thing right now that is the biggest, this is really hemlock specific, but we're trying to figure out how best to plant out like clones of hemlocks. So whether that be grafting or rooted cuttings, there's a little bit of struggle there already trying to figure out how best to do that. Obviously, person power is a huge one. Getting enough people and resources to go out and actually plant out a ton of hemlocks is a big one. Those are the ones that are forthright on my mind right now, but I'm sure there are probably hurdles every step of the way, but that's not going to stop us.
And like hypothetically, if you guys did get to a point where it was, you got like ready to go, we've got we've got a hemlock that can go on the ground that can withstand the woolly adelgid. I mean, where would you put them initially?
So site prioritization is also a big thing. There would have to be a lot of research that goes into it. In general, riparian areas, so stream side, are the most sensitive hemlock habitats. So we'll probably want to target areas that have those ecologically sensitive zones and have maybe had the biggest decline of hemlocks for the longest time. And so I would say that's where we would start. That's obviously still a lot of area. And so you'd have to probably narrow it down even further. And that would probably come down to what other species are present, what else has, who owns the land, maybe if there's cultural or recreational value, that all probably would play a role.
Diana just put in a interesting question that I feel like a lot of folks have thought about with the woolly adelgid going on. I mean, do you recommend planting hemlocks in like folks' backyards? Deanna lives in Asheville.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Hemlocks are great yard trees. They act as really good privacy screens and wind buffers and temperature insulators. You do have to protect it from hemlock woolly adelgid, but again, that's a pretty DIY friendly and relatively cheap thing to do. So especially if you're planting a already healthy hemlock, you can get away with treating it every probably 5, 6, 7 years. And if it's just the one hemlock, you're looking at $10 per treatment. So,
That's really great to hear. That it's affordable and also you don't have to do it like every couple weeks or something. It's
oh
every
yeah,
5 or 7 years. All right, so maybe just last question to kind of round things out, unless anybody has any more burning questions they want to put into the chat. And we kind of addressed this earlier with Christine's question, but I mean, I know like we've all heard the story about the American chestnut, and we certainly don't want to see hemlocks get to a point where they're just like completely off the landscape. And just, personally, I guess like, are you more optimistic or pessimistic about the future of hemlocks in North America?
oh, I'm super optimistic. I
Awesome.
would be in the wrong job if I was not.
I hear
Um,
that.
no, I'm really optimistic. There's like, I didn't even get into the biological control tactics that are being researched right now and the silvicultural research that's going on. I remember I brought up that toolbox, and all of those aspects are being further developed and further researched. And the chestnut is a really sad and unfortunate story. But I think we have a little bit of a leg up on them because we still have hemlocks, a good amount of hemlocks living in stands in healthy functioning habitats. And so we have those to work off of, where the chestnuts, it's rare to see a chestnut anymore. And so that's harder for them to get going on. So yeah, I'm really hopeful, and I'm not losing the battle yet.
Well, thank you so much, Olivia. And again, y'all's organization is really doing some groundbreaking work, and the Lingering Hemlock Initiative is super exciting as well. So appreciate all your work that you're doing. And thank you, Debbie, on behalf of High Country Wild as well. And yeah, hemlock trees they're amazing for wildlife. We've got to do what we can to keep them out there. But yeah, hope y'all will send Olivia a bunch of emails with questions, and we'll send out a follow-up email as well here in the next week with the recording. But Olivia, unless you've got anything else to add, we will conclude the webinar. All right. Well,
No, awesome.
yeah,
Thank you, Luke, and thank you, everyone. Happy searching.
awesome. Y'all have a great night.